The midday sun beat down on a luxury apartment complex on Spain's Costa del Sol, glinting off the turquoise water of a communal swimming pool. Beneath the palms, an Irishman named Hutch sprinted for his life. Moments earlier, the crack of gunfire had shattered the mid-morning calm. Residents and holidaymakers scattered in panic as a masked assailant gave chase across manicured gardens. Hutch, 34 and living in exile on the sunny coast, desperately tried to escape through a back gate, only to find it locked. Cornered by a tall gunman in a balaclava, Hutch raised his hands and pleaded for mercy. The murder of Hutch would turn out to be a pivotal moment, the opening salvo in a vicious feud that would shock Ireland and expose the reach of Irish organized crime in Spain. To understand how an Irish gangster came to be gunned down in a Spanish resort, we must step back and see how the sun-drenched southern coast of Spain earned its notorious nickname, the Costa del Crime. For decades, Spain's Costa del Sol has been both a sanctuary and a battleground for criminals from across Europe. Its warm climate, beaches, and thriving expat communities offer a perfect hiding place for fugitives and a lucrative hub for drug trafficking. Starting in the late 1970s, British crooks on the run flocked here by the dozen. At the time, a quirk in the law provided them safe haven. An extradition treaty between the UK and Spain had lapsed, meaning British felons living it up couldn't be easily hauled back home to face justice. The British tabloids gleefully dubbed the region the Costa del Crime, as infamous figures like train robber Ronnie Biggs's associates and London gang bosses soaked up the sun beyond the reach of UK police. Yachts, luxury villas, and seaside bars became the playground of these outlaws. Before long, Irish gangsters also recognized the Costa del Sol's appeal. By the early 1980s, Ireland's underworld was expanding, and a few brazen criminals saw Spain as an ideal bolt hole. One of the first was Larry Dunn, an Irish drug boss who had unleashed a wave of heroin on Dublin streets in the late 70s. In 1983, when the law finally closed in on Dunn, he skipped bail and vanished. He spent time hiding out on the Costa del Sol, enjoying the good life with the proceeds of his drug empire. Spanish beaches must have felt a world away from Dublin's gritty housing estates he'd flooded with narcotics. Dunn's freedom didn't last. He was eventually arrested in Portugal and extradited home, serving a long prison term. But his brief Spanish sojourn was a sign of things to come. Spain had entered the gangsters' geography as a place of refuge and opportunity. Fast forward to the 1990s. Ireland's economy was booming in the Celtic Tiger years, and with newfound wealth came a ravenous appetite for drugs, especially cocaine and cannabis. Irish criminal gangs, once small-time, became more ambitious and international. The brutal 1996 murder of Dublin journalist Veronica Guerin, who had fearlessly investigated Ireland's drug lords, proved a turning point. In the aftermath of Guerin's assassination, the Irish government formed the Criminal Assets Bureau and poured resources into cracking down on organized crime. Suddenly, gang bosses found themselves targeted at home as never before. Many decided it was wise to shift operations abroad, or at least maintain a base away from Ireland's intense scrutiny. Spain, just a couple of hours' flight from Dublin, but far outside the Garda's jurisdiction, beckoned. One of the men to make that move was Kinahan. Often nicknamed the Dapper Don for his affable, well-spoken manner, Kinahan had a long criminal resume that dated back to the 1970s. In his youth, he'd been a fraudster and low-level heroin dealer in Dublin, known for charming his victims by posing as a posh businessman. He served several prison stints in Ireland, at one point sharing a cell landing with notorious criminals and learning the ropes of the international drug trade. By the time he got out of an Irish prison in the early 1990s, Kinahan understood that the future of his illicit business lay beyond Ireland's shores. As Ireland's authorities passed new laws to seize criminal profits and imprison drug barons, Kinahan slipped away to continental Europe. He spent time in Amsterdam, then Europe's bustling drug supermarket, connecting with suppliers and other gangsters. Fluent in multiple languages, he reportedly learned Spanish and Dutch while in prison. Kinahan transformed himself from a streetwise Dublin hood into a sophisticated international narcotics broker. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, he built a network spanning the Netherlands, Belgium, the UK, and Spain. Spain, especially the Costa del Sol, became central to his plans. There were good reasons for that. Geography had made southern Spain a smuggler's paradise for centuries. Its extensive coastline, nearly 800 kilometers of sun-baked shore facing the Mediterranean and Atlantic, offered countless coves and marinas where illicit cargo could be landed unseen. Across the sea lay Morocco, source of vast quantities of cannabis resin bound for Europe. And further beyond, shipping routes from Latin America flowed into ports like Algeciras, Cadiz, and Valencia, turning Spain into Europe's gateway for South American cocaine. For a criminal entrepreneur like Kinahan, the Costa del Sol was the perfect strategic base. Close to the supply, close to the customers, with a well-established underworld and plenty of ways to launder dirty money in glitzy coastal developments. By the early 2000s, Kinahan settled in the Marbella area and set up shop. He wasn't the only Irish criminal figure drawn to the region then. Some from Dublin's inner city, others from factions in Limerick and beyond, were also investing in Spanish bolt holes. John Gilligan, the Dublin drug boss who was accused of masterminding Veronica Guerin's murder, had stashed cash in properties on the Costa Blanca. After serving a long prison sentence, Gilligan would later relocate to Spain as well, apparently unable to resist returning to the game. Another gangster, John Traynor, an accomplice of Gilligan, spent years moving between the Netherlands and Spain, staying one step ahead of Irish authorities. In Spain's English-speaking expat enclaves, men like these could blend in, posing as sun-loving businessmen or retired gentlemen, all while continuing their life of crime. Kinahan, however, was building something far more structured and expansive than a personal hideaway. He was creating a cartel. Based out of a luxurious villa in Estepona, reportedly worth some $6 million and equipped with all the trappings of wealth, Kinahan acted like a corporate CEO of crime. He cultivated contacts with major drug suppliers from South America and North Africa, negotiated deals with other European crime syndicates, and started importing narcotics on an industrial scale. Spanish police and media began to hear whispers of an Irish mafia on the Costa del Sol, an organized Irish gang with tentacles reaching back to Ireland and out across Europe. Unlike the rowdy British crooks of the 80s, these Irish operators in the 2000s kept a lower public profile. They weren't brawling in bars or splashing their names in tabloids. They were quietly investing in real estate, opening businesses as fronts, and corrupting local officials to grease the wheels. The Kinahan organization's footprint in Spain kept growing. Christie's two sons, Daniel Kinahan and Christopher Jr., moved to the Costa del Sol and joined the family business. Daniel Kinahan in particular emerged as his father's heir apparent, learning the trade and eventually taking over daily operations. Daniel, younger and even more ambitious, helped modernize and expand the cartel. He forged alliances with other underworld heavyweights, British drug traffickers from London and Liverpool, Scottish gangsters from Glasgow, Dutch-Moroccan kingpins from Amsterdam, and even Italian mafia figures. Together, these groups increasingly coordinated their efforts, aligning as a multinational consortium to dominate Europe's cocaine market. It was sometimes referred to as a super cartel, a loose coalition of the continent's top crime networks pooling their resources. And at the center of many of these alliances was the Kinahan clan, with Daniel Kinahan acting as a key power broker. Under the radar, the Irish gangs on the Costa del Sol built a drug pipeline that spanned continents. Tons of cocaine would be sourced from Colombian and Mexican cartels, deadly partners from whom the Kinahans bought product, and shipped across the Atlantic. Some shipments arrived in Spain's commercial ports, hidden in consignments of legitimate goods, like fruit or scrap metal, to be offloaded by dock workers bribed or intimidated into turning a blind eye. Other loads came in via smaller vessels, fishing boats or private yachts that could unload on isolated beaches at night. From Morocco, meanwhile, powerful hashish was ferried across the slim Strait of Gibraltar in high-powered speedboats, landing on Spain's southern coast by the ton. The Irish crews integrated these streams of contraband and helped move them onwards, north through Spain into France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Britain, and of course back to Ireland. Costa del Sol towns like Marbella, Puerto Banús, Estepona became nodes in a vast smuggling network. Villas doubled as safe houses and warehouses. Multi-million euro mansions concealed drug stashes and cash stockpiles. Fleet of expensive cars were not just symbols of status, but useful for transporting illicit goods in hidden compartments. The Irish gangsters cultivated an appearance of respectable wealth. Daniel Kinahan even dabbled in the professional boxing world, co-founding a boxing management company and gym in Marbella. Fighters trained in the sun, while Daniel rubbed shoulders with celebrities and athletes, presenting himself as a legitimate sports promoter. It was a clever cover story, one that lent the Kinahan name a sheen of respectability for a while, but behind it lay an empire of narcotics and bloodshed. Indeed, beneath the sunshine and champagne lifestyle, violence was always near at hand. The Irish gangs operating on Spanish soil were ready to use brutal force to protect their interests or settle scores. And inevitably, conflicts arose, both internally and with rival criminal groups. One early flashpoint came in the summer of 2014. By that time, the Kinahan cartel was riding high, making huge profits. But money and mistrust often go hand in hand in the underworld. In September 2014, one of Christy Kinahan's trusted lieutenants, an Irish enforcer named Gerard "Hatchet" Kavanagh, was executed in cold blood on the Costa del Sol. Kavanagh was a feared figure, known as a debt collector who would threaten or attack anyone who owed the Kinahan cartel money. But on the evening of September 6, 2014, the hunter became the prey. Kavanagh was relaxing on the terrace of Harmon's, an Irish pub in Elveria, near Marbella, when two masked gunmen strode up and opened fire without warning. In front of stunned patrons, they pumped 9 bullets into him, then fled to a BMW, which was later found torched. The hitmen's efficiency, masks on, dozens of rounds fired, escape car burned, indicated a professional assassination. Spanish investigators were left scratching their heads as to who ordered the hit on Hatchet Kavanagh. This was a man who worked for the Kinahans. Killing him was a dangerous gambit that could provoke retaliation from the most powerful Irish cartel. Rumors flew in the underworld. Some said Kavanagh had crossed other gangsters, perhaps a dispute with Russian Mafia figures who were active on the Costa del Sol, or a feud with a Dutch drug gang. Indeed, around that same time, a Dutch crime boss had been shot dead just outside Marbella, suggesting a turbulent criminal landscape with multiple vendettas playing out. Another theory was even more chilling. Kavanagh might have been taken out by his own side, punished for failing to recoup a huge debt. Later reports indicated that Kavanagh had been sent to Dublin to recover $1.5 million from local dealers who owed the Kinahans. He couldn't get the money back. In such a ruthless business, a failure of that magnitude might have sealed his fate. Whether it was Kinahan's own organization meting out discipline or foreign rivals eliminating an obstacle, the result was the same. Gerard Kavanagh lay dead in a Spanish morgue, and his murderers were never identified. Spanish authorities quietly shelved the investigation after hitting a wall of silence. It was a stark reminder that on the Costa del Sol, solving gangland killings is exceedingly difficult. Witnesses are scarce or too afraid to talk, and the perpetrators slip back into the shadows of the international underworld. The murder of Kavanagh signaled that the Irish gang presence in Spain was not going to be peaceful. This sun-kissed coast was also a battleground where scores were settled with bullets. Less than a year later came the killing of Gary Hutch, with which our story began. Gary Hutch was actually the nephew of another prominent Dublin crime figure, Gerry the Monk Hutch, but he himself had been working closely with the Kinahan cartel in Spain. Hutch had been part of Daniel Kinahan's inner circle for years, reportedly a trusted associate, even a friend. But something went terribly wrong between them by 2015. It later emerged that Daniel Kinahan and others suspected Gary Hutch of betrayal, specifically of leaking information to Spanish police or double-dealing in drug shipments. These suspicions, it must be noted, were never definitively proven, and in fact, evidence later suggested Hutch was not an informant. But in the paranoid atmosphere of organized crime, even a rumor can be a death sentence. The trust between Gary Hutch and the Kinahans collapsed. There were attempts at resolution. According to accounts pieced together later, Hutch knew he was in danger and tried to save himself. He offered money, a substantial sum, said to be around $200,000, to placate the Kinahan leadership and call off any retribution. Another story has it that he proposed doing a job, possibly even planning to shoot someone on Kinahan's behalf as penance. At one point, there was allegedly a deal struck. Hutch would pay compensation and leave Spain, and he'd be spared. But if such an agreement was made, it was short-lived. Ultimately, the order came down from on high. Gary Hutch had to die. And so, on that late September morning in 2015, the assassins came for him at the Angel de Miraflores apartment complex, where Hutch had been laying low. The execution was ruthless and staged like a scene from a crime thriller. Hutch managed to dodge initial shots in the underground car park and bolted for the open, desperately seeking an exit, but the gunman pursued him relentlessly around the pool. Multiple rounds struck Hutch in the back as he ran, and then the final shots to the chest and head ended his life. Vacationers gaped in horror as the killer escaped. A burnt-out BMW found not far away suggested the culprits were as professional as those who had done Kavanagh in. The slaying of Gary Hutch sent shockwaves through the Irish underworld. This was not just another minor player eliminated, it was a direct attack that cut close to a powerful crime family back in Dublin, the Hutches. Jerry the Monk Hutch, Gary's uncle, was a well-known figure who had once been one of Dublin's top armed robbers and had substantial underworld clout. The monk was reportedly livid and deeply grieved at his nephew's betrayal and murder. Any attempts by intermediaries to calm the situation, to arrange a sit-down with the Kinahans and negotiate peace, were rebuffed. For the monk, there was no turning back. Vengeance was now on the table. Thus began the infamous Hutch-Kinahan feud, a spiraling blood feud that would claim numerous lives on the streets of Ireland and even reach back into Spain. Jerry Hutch's allies struck the first spectacular blow of retaliation on Irish soil just months later. In February 2016, during a crowded boxing weigh-in event at the Regency Hotel in Dublin, an event ironically tied to a Kinahan-sponsored boxing promotion, gunmen linked to the Hutch side stormed in disguised as police tactical officers and opened fire. Their target was believed to be Daniel Kinahan himself, who was present. Daniel narrowly escaped, but one of his closest men, a Kinahan lieutenant named David Byrne, was killed in the brazen attack, which played out in front of cameras and children. The Regency Hotel shooting made international headlines. Organized crime had erupted into open warfare in the Irish capital, and ordinary people were caught in the crossfire. The Kinahan cartel, furious and embarrassed by the attempt on Daniel's life, responded with ferocity. Over the next months and years, a series of assassinations were carried out primarily by the Kinahan side against anyone seen as aligned with the Hutches. Hitmen killed Jerry Hutch's relatives and friends in a ruthless campaign to decimate the rival faction. The death toll mounted quickly. Brothers, sons, acquaintances of the monk were gunned down one by one. By the time the feud's intensity ebbed, around 18 people had been murdered in connection with this war. It was one of Ireland's deadliest gang conflicts ever. Spain, which had been the starting point of the feud, was not spared from its reverberations. In the immediate aftermath of Gary Hutch's murder, Spanish police found themselves drawn into the feud investigation. They cooperated with Irish Gardaí to share intelligence on the Kinahan group's activities on Spanish soil. During the Regency attack probe, Spanish authorities even provided protection to Daniel Kinahan for a time, worried that the cycle of revenge might reach him there. In one chilling incident just a few months after Gary Hutch's death, on New Year's Eve 2015, a team of gunmen tried to hunt down Jerry Hutch himself in Spain. The monk had traveled to the Canary Islands for a holiday. Word reached his enemies. Gunmen loyal to the Kinahans allegedly tracked him to a bar and prepared to shoot him dead, only to find that Hutch had already left the premises moments before. He narrowly evaded an assassination on Spanish soil. The Hutch-Kinahan feud underscored how Spain had become both a sanctuary and a battleground. These Irish gang bosses felt as comfortable ordering murders on Spanish territory as they did on Irish turf. Spain wasn't just a hideout to relax in, it was an extension of their domain, a place to settle scores if needed. And yet it was also a place to run when the heat got too intense. After the Regency incident in 2016, Daniel Kinahan and other high-ranking members evidently decided that even the Costa del Sol was too exposed. International scrutiny was intensifying. Law enforcement cooperation between Ireland, Spain, and other countries was at an all-time high because of the feud. Within the same year, Daniel Kinahan quietly slipped away from his Marbella mansion and rebased himself in a new haven far away, Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. Many of his top associates followed. In a sense, Dubai became the new Costa del Crime of the 21st century, a glitzy international city attracting wealthy fugitives, and the Kinahans were at the forefront of that migration. But even as they relocated, their influence in Spain did not disappear. Plenty of lieutenants, facilitators, and money launderers remained active on Spanish soil to handle the cartel's European interests. Spain continued to be a major transit hub for their drug shipments and a playground for their lower-ranked members, and Spanish authorities continued to pursue them. It's worth reflecting on how Spanish law enforcement's approach had evolved over the years. In the 2000s, as foreign gangs proliferated on the costas, Spain formed dedicated units to tackle organized crime, often in collaboration with Europol and police from criminals' home countries. In May 2010, Spanish law enforcement launched a landmark strike against the Kinahan cartel in an operation codenamed Operation Shovel. In coordinated raids across the Costa del Sol, Spanish officers, backed by intelligence from Ireland, the UK, and Europol, arrested dozens of suspects, including Christy Kinahan himself, his sons, and their associates. Homes were raided in affluent neighborhoods around Marbella. Luxury cars, cash, and documents were seized. The Spanish authorities announced triumphantly that they had cracked a major European drug ring. For a moment, it seemed like the Kinahan empire might crumble, but things did not go as planned. Soon after their arrest, Christy Kinahan and his sons managed to secure bail. It turned out that building a prosecutable case was incredibly complex. The evidence spanned multiple jurisdictions and relied on extensive surveillance and financial tracing. The Kinahans, wealthy and cunning, hired top lawyers and maintained a cold silence. Even more troubling, allegations arose that the gang had infiltrated the Spanish authorities themselves. Reports emerged that at least 2 Spanish police officers were on the Kinahan payroll, receiving monthly bribes to leak information or tip off the mobsters about investigations. This corruption may have fatally undermined Operation Shovel from the inside. There were hints that the Kinahans knew the raids were coming and had moved or hidden the most incriminating evidence. In the end, Operation Shovel did not deliver the knockout blow police hoped for. After months in custody, Christy and Daniel Kinahan walked free, never formally convicted in Spain of the major drug trafficking and money laundering offenses that were suspected. The investigation limped on for years, largely in vain. By 2021, over a decade later, Spanish courts had effectively shelved the case. In a final twist of the knife, the Kinahans even petitioned Spanish courts to return the assets seized during the raids: cars, cash, and watches. Many of those items, including hundreds of thousands of euros in bail money, were indeed returned to them, as the case against them fizzled. It was a humbling outcome for law enforcement and only bolstered the Kinahan cartel's reputation for being untouchable. Christy Kinahan earned a mythic status, the veteran Irish crime boss that even international police forces couldn't pin down, and his son Daniel grew bolder, believing the family was impervious to serious prosecution. But the authorities did not give up. If anything, the Hutch-Kinahan feud and its public carnage forced a redoubling of efforts. Irish police, the Garda, poured resources into a special task force targeting the Kinahans' operations worldwide. They worked ever more closely with Spanish law enforcement, British agencies like the UK's National Crime Agency, and later even American authorities. The net was tightening slowly. Even as the Kinahan leadership fled to Dubai, their foot soldiers and money men still on the Costa del Sol began to face more pressure. Spanish police started rolling up smaller cells, seizing drug shipments and arresting syndicate members caught with narcotics or firearms. In one joint Spanish-Irish operation in late 2020, officers raided a villa in Alicante belonging to none other than John Gilligan, the aging Irish drug boss who had once been Ireland's most wanted. Gilligan, now in his late 60s, had settled into a quiet retirement on the Spanish coast, or so it seemed. In reality, he couldn't resist getting back into the drug game. When Spanish police stormed his house, with Garda and British agents coordinating in the background, they found packages of cannabis, thousands of ecstasy pills, and several firearms. One weapon was especially noteworthy: a Colt Python revolver buried in the garden. That model of gun matched the very one used to murder journalist Veronica Guerin back in 1996. The discovery raised the tantalizing possibility that Gilligan had stashed the murder weapon all these years and brought it with him to Spain, a chilling connection between past and present. Gilligan was arrested along with several associates, and he now faces charges in Spain for drug trafficking and weapons possession. The one-time Irish kingpin had come full circle, from ordering hits in Dublin to being caught by Spanish police in a quiet Costa Blanca town. Throughout 2021 and 2022, as the Kinahan-Hutch feud waned with many principal actors dead or behind bars, law enforcement attention pivoted squarely onto dismantling the broader Kinahan cartel infrastructure. A breakthrough came via international coordination. In April 2022, the United States government took the unprecedented step of publicly sanctioning the Kinahan organized crime group as a significant transnational drug trafficking organization. The U.S. Treasury named Christy Kinahan, Daniel Kinahan, and others as sanctioned individuals, effectively freezing any assets they might have in U.S. jurisdictions and forbidding Americans from doing business with them. The U.S. State Department went a step further, offering a $5 million reward for information leading to the arrest of the Kinahan leaders. This was a clear sign the Kinahans were now considered a global menace, not just an Irish problem. Spain was one of the places where this pressure immediately took effect. In September 2022, Spanish Guardia Civil, working with the Garda DEA and other agencies, launched coordinated raids in the Costa del Sol targeting Kinahan-linked operatives. One high-profile target was Johnny Morrissey, an Irish-born gangster long based in Marbella who had become known as an important Kinahan money launderer. Morrissey had led a double life: on the surface a jovial expat, running a trendy bar and promoting an international vodka brand. Underneath, a key cog in washing drug money through front companies and bank accounts across Europe. Spanish officers arrested Morrissey at his mansion in Marbella and seized evidence indicating he laundered hundreds of millions of euros for the cartel. His glamorous wife, who ran the vodka business, was also detained. The downfall of Johnny Cash Morrissey, as he was nicknamed, demonstrated how far the Kinahan enterprise had spread its financial tentacles, and how determined authorities had become to sever them. Another target around that time was a Dublin man named Liam Byrne, a close ally of the Kinahans who had ties to Spain and the UK. Byrne's own brother had been gunned down in the Regency Hotel attack, and Byrne himself had moved abroad amid the feud. In 2023, Liam Byrne was arrested by Spanish police while dining at a restaurant in Mallorca, acting on a request from UK authorities, where he was wanted on firearms charges. Even the once secure holiday resorts were no longer beyond the law's reach. Bit by bit, the Spanish police, often working hand in glove with Irish detectives, were picking off the remnants of the Irish gangs on their soil. Meanwhile, massive drug busts continued to illustrate the scale of the narcotics pipeline running through Spain. In one headline-grabbing case in 2023, a cargo ship named MV Matthew was intercepted off the coast of Ireland carrying an astronomical haul of cocaine, over 2.2 tons, worth an estimated $157 million. International investigators tied that shipment back to networks in Spain and beyond. It was suspected that the Kinahan cartel had orchestrated the logistics, working with South American suppliers and even possibly Middle Eastern intermediaries to finance and transport the load. The Kinahans' fingerprints seemed to be on deals everywhere, even when they themselves were far off in Dubai. Spain, for its part, sought to close any remaining loopholes that made it attractive to criminals. Extradition treaties were long in place, no more easy escapes like the old days for Brits, and cooperation with European policing was tighter than ever. Spanish prosecutors also revisited some old files. In 2020, they finally filed formal charges against Christy Kinahan Sr. for a minor offense, passport fraud, requiring him to face a trial in Spain for using false identity documents. It may have been a comparatively small charge, but it signaled that the Spanish justice system still had an eye on him. Even Jerry the Monk Hutch, who for years evaded capture by hopping between Europe's safe havens, found Spain was no longer a guaranteed refuge. In August 2021, Hutch was arrested by Spanish National Police in a small town in the Costa del Sol after months on the run. He had been lying low to avoid an Irish arrest warrant for the Regency Hotel murder conspiracy. Spanish officers, acting on intelligence and a European warrant, cornered him in a restaurant. He surrendered quietly. Within weeks, he was extradited back to Ireland to stand trial. In a dramatic conclusion, Hutch was acquitted in 2023 of the murder charge by an Irish court, but Spain had done its part by not letting him remain a fugitive on their soil. Spanish police simultaneously uncovered an alleged money laundering operation tied to Hutch's group, reinforcing that the Irish gangs had also been washing their illicit profits through Spanish banks, property and businesses. Perhaps one of the most striking recent episodes on the Costa del Sol occurred in the spring of 2025, a reminder that the Costa del Crime still lives up to its name. Two Scottish gangsters, Eddie Lyons Jr. and Ross Monaghan, were having drinks at an Irish-owned pub when assassins stormed in and riddled them with bullets. Pandemonium broke out among the patrons as the gunmen escaped into the night. These weren't random victims. Lyons and Monaghan were known members of a Glasgow crime family, the Lyons clan, which had forged a close alliance with the Kinahan Cartel. They had allegedly helped the Kinahans facilitate huge drug shipments, including that massive Matthew cocaine consignment. Their murders in Spain raised an urgent question: was this a new front in gang warfare, and would the Kinahans be drawn into it? Some Underworld watchers speculated that a rival Scottish faction or another international mob might be trying to send a message, possibly seeking to hurt the Kinahans by killing their allies. In the paranoid world of organized crime, nothing happens in isolation. Any hit could be part of a larger puzzle of alliances and betrayals. What was clear is that even as of 2025, the Costa del Sol remained a hot zone where criminal scores are settled, crossing national boundaries. Irish, British, Dutch, Moroccan, Russian, many flags fly in this underworld, and Spain is where they often collide. So how did Spain become both a sanctuary and a battleground for these Irish gangs? The answer lies in a mix of factors. Historically, Spain offered refuge through legal gaps and a relaxed coastal lifestyle. Then, as global drug routes shifted, Spain's position made it a crucial logistics base. You could broker a deal with a Colombian cartel over dinner in Marbella and dispatch a boat from Venezuela to Galicia in northern Spain, from where the cocaine could be driven anywhere in Europe. The Irish gangs certainly weren't the only ones doing this. The Italians, the Balkan cartels, the Dutch networks all had their own people on the ground, but the Irish carved out a formidable niche. By building connections with local Spanish smugglers and other foreigners, they ensured a steady flow of product. And the profits were staggering. During the boom years, the Kinahan cartel was said to handle drug shipments worth hundreds of millions of euros. They laundered that money through classic methods: real estate purchases, villas, hotels, land development deals, cash-intensive businesses, bars, nightclubs, car dealerships, and also through more creative avenues like boxing promotions and even speculation in things like cryptocurrency or art. Spanish resorts, with their gleaming new developments and cash-driven tourist economy, provided ample cover to wash dirty money clean. But as we have seen, the same features that made Spain attractive to criminals also made it a place where different criminal groups rubbed shoulders and occasionally bumped heads with lethal consequences. By the 2010s, the Costa del Sol had transformed from a one-time safe haven into a competitive arena where various gangs vied for influence or cooperated in uneasy truces. The Irish found both partners and enemies among the other expat mafias. For example, the Kinahan group reportedly allied at times with British crime families, some as far afield as from Liverpool, and with a Scottish syndicate, the Lyons family in Glasgow. They also did business with the Italians, including Camorra Mafia brokers who, like them, operated out of Marbella's shadowy luxury. Spanish investigators noted alliances between the Kinahans and Eastern European mafias, and even networks with Middle Eastern links. On the flip side, they also clashed. Gerard Kavanagh's suspected disputes with Russians and Dutch criminals is one instance, and there were likely many conflicts kept quiet to avoid drawing police attention. For Spanish law enforcement, the challenge of policing the Costa del Crime has been akin to a never-ending chess match with master criminals. They bolster surveillance, turn criminals against each other when possible, and coordinate internationally, as crime is now a global affair. The long game is slowly paying off. Many of the once untouchable Irish gang bosses are either behind bars or on the run with limited places left to hide. Christy Kinahan, now in his mid-60s, remains at large, rumored to be moving between safe havens, still hoping to evade justice. Daniel Kinahan, in his mid-40s, is ensconced in Dubai, where he continues to fight extradition efforts, but the walls are closing in. Numerous countries are pressuring the UAE to expel or prosecute such figures. The Kinahan name is now internationally infamous, which somewhat ironically makes hiding harder. Their faces have been on DEA wanted posters, their bank accounts flagged. Other Irish gangsters have met quieter fates. Some were taken out by their own cohorts. Others retired or were captured. And what of Spain? The Costa del Sol today is still a place of postcard beauty. Swaying palm trees, yachts in the marina, tourists sipping sangria. But there is a less visible side policed by Spanish Guardia Civil units in balaclavas carrying submachine guns, ready to raid a villa at a moment's notice. The Spanish authorities have sent a clear message. Their country will no longer be the impunity playground it was in the 1980s. High-profile operations, like the ones against the Kinahan associates, show that foreign gangsters are being watched closely. Spain has beefed up laws against money laundering, imposed stricter controls on cash transactions and property purchases, and invested in better intelligence on organized crime. While criminals still gravitate to the sun and opportunity here, they do so knowing they are in the sights of a very active cross-border police effort. Still, as the events of recent years demonstrate, the legacy of the Costa del crime isn't fully erased. The massive profits of the drug trade ensure that gangs will continue to risk using Spain as a gateway. And as long as multiple mafias operate in proximity, violence can erupt on Spanish streets without warning. A shooting in a seaside cafe, a car bomb outside a villa, a corpse found in the hills, reminders that the underworld is never far away. In the saga of Irish gangs on the Costa del Sol, one sees a larger story of globalized crime. What started decades ago as a few fugitives lying low in Franco's former paradise has evolved into a sophisticated narcotics pipeline and a web of alliances that span continents. Ireland's gangsters once found an easy refuge on Spain's shores. Now those shores have become another front line in the war against organized crime. From Larry Dunn's escape to the Costa in the 1980s, to Christy Kinahan's drug empire in the 2000s, to the blood feud carnage of the 2010s, and into the crackdown of the 2020s, Spain has seen it all. The Costa del Sol became a sanctuary for Irish criminals seeking sun-soaked anonymity and a battleground where rivalries turned deadly. As a narration-ready tale, the story of the Irish on the Costa del Crime reads almost like a crime novel. Except it is all too real, written in blood and cocaine. It is the story of how a quiet Miraflores apartment complex became the scene of an international Gangland hit. How a Marbella boxing gym could mask a drug lord's command center. How a simple extradition loophole could spawn an entire era of outlaws living openly under the Spanish sun. And ultimately, how relentless collaboration by police on two sides of Europe is bringing that era to an end. In the end, Spain's Costa del Sol remains what it has always been. A beautiful slice of Mediterranean coast where people come to live out their dreams or hide from their nightmares. For the Irish gang bosses of yesterday, it was a bit of both. A dream of wealth and power, a nightmare of violence and retribution. The Spanish sun shone equally on their champagne parties and on the funerals of their victims. Today, as the last of those Irish cartel chiefs fight to keep their freedom, one can say that Spain was not just their sanctuary and battlefield, it became their downfall as well, as the law caught up with them under that same bright sun. The legend of the Costa del Crime will live on in infamy, but so too will the relentless efforts of those who work to take it apart, piece by piece. The story is far from over, but one thing is clear. The heyday of Irish gangs ruling the Spanish coast with impunity is coming to a close, ending an extraordinary chapter in the annals of organized crime.